Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Freeman. This week, we bring you stories from the Antigua Forum in Guatemala, an annual gathering of international entrepreneurs dedicated to developing free market solutions for vexing social problems. In the second half of our show, we'll speak with Cuban author and journalist Carlos Alberto Montaner about his imprisonment by the Castro regime and prospects for Cuba's future. Up first, we're pleased to welcome former World Bank economist Elena Panaritis, senior economic advisor to Greek's PASOK government during the global financial crisis and the founder of the Thought for Action Foundation. Elena, welcome to the show. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Bill.
We're back here at the Antigua Forum, an annual gathering dealing with many global issues. I asked you on the show to bring us up to date about what's going on in Greece. Before we do, let's go back a little bit. You cut your teeth at the World Bank, yes?
Correct.
And what were you doing there, and how do you view the organization today?
I've been there for over a decade. In the 90s, I was involved in the transformation, if you wish, of Latin America, of the countries that actually reformed themselves after a serious debt crisis.
So there's some success stories in there.
Huge success stories. But the success story entails the country's will to want to do the success and the World Bank's ability to follow up on that will. We never have a success if it's just an initiation from the World Bank, and that's why the World Bank is never an initiator. It's not possible for the World Bank. It's an organization. It's a bureaucracy.
It can only support change that's trying to happen. It can't make change.
No, for sure. It cannot make change, yeah.
So after the World Bank and before you joined the PASOK government, what were you involved in?
I started, I was awarded by the U.S. government as Best Practice and Innovation Awards, a U.S. citizenship. And that was based on a model that disrupted economic development because it transforms the informal sector, and it's based on property rights definitions and provision of property rights among all these informal individuals, which is about 70% of the world's population.
So when you say informal sector, you mean people that are operating outside the legal structures or the stunted legal structures of the governments that they live under?
Not necessarily, actually. And informal doesn't really mean illegal. Informal means somebody who is trying really hard to operate in the context of his or her own society, but bureaucracy and red tape and requirements and regulations are so tough.
Licenses
and impossible to go through. So it's not will that makes him get out of those structures to actually finalize any transaction. It is necessity and ability to actually live a life. And what we do in my new company called Panel Group, which is a startup that produces formalization around the world, is establish models with governments in a joint stock way, in a joint company or in a public-private partnership, by which we actually generate formalized new systems. So we reform the formal system so it can be attractive.
So you put a pathway in place for governments to change their economies, and only at that point can the World Bank come in and offer help and support.
Yeah, afterwards, indeed, because it requires a lot of hand-holding, and it requires, frankly, a strong will from the state and appetite for reform.
So in 2009, you joined the Greek PASOK government as an advisor to the Prime Minister?
In 2009, I was called in by at the time, incumbent Prime Minister Papandreou to lead the ticket as an appointed Speaker of the House, if you wish, that is not elected.
The system set aside seats for the leading party.
Correct. And right when I started my position, which was October of 2009, about 24 days later, I announced to my Prime Minister that we are really in bad shape. And I would not be surprised if we're going to collapse by the end of 2009, which rolled his eyes, it generated a lot of fogginess.
What's the Greek word for angst?
The Greek word for angst, the German word for angst is German. The Greek word for angst is anchos. And he was so devastated with the piece of information I gave him. And then I realized as time was passing by that, as I've also noticed in my other experience with working in other countries under stress and crisis, established political systems and established political parties are usually the ones that have actually brought the country where it is. So they cannot be the ones that are going to move the change.
They can't acknowledge it. So how did Greece dig itself into such a deep hole?
It's interesting because I call all the time, and I write in my articles and in my papers, that Greece is the canary in the coal mine. It's not really Greece that has dug itself in that deep hole. And plus, Greece is only 2% of the European Union GDP. It's all of the European Union that has dug itself in a big hole. And we're hiding it, if you wish, by just pinpointing one country. And we're thinking that if we make one country really the evil country, then we're waking up in the morning and everything is finally perfect with the rest of the Union, which is absolutely not the case.
But the bloated state sector, the large pension liabilities, these are pretty extreme in Greece.
They're as equally bad as in other European Union countries. The distinction is that we have no productivity, to even
cover it up.
cover part of it up. And all of it was covered by a lot of subsidies that all European Union countries take. A lot of subsidies that they're given to the European Union countries and the Eurozone countries. But think about it, since 2008 that we had the Lehman Brothers debacle, the Eurozone has only had zero growth.
Yeah. We worry that this is in our future as we follow their policies.
Well, you really need to work very hard to get there, but I do notice, as you're saying, that there is a tendency to go towards this type of policy, which is not at all viable for innovation, entrepreneurship, new ideas. And that's what actually is in the center of economic growth. The center of economic growth is not bureaucracy from Brussels.
Well, if you look at the Greek economic system, I think it's also a leader in the kinds of regulations it puts in the way of people trying to start businesses.
Absolutely, we are. We're based on a French system of productivity. We have copied the commercial code from France when we became a state in the 1830s. And we have copied the family and other codes from Germany. So we're really based on a legal infrastructure that is not ours. And you know better than anybody else, if you walk around the neighborhoods of America, you find Greeks entrepreneurial all the time.
All the
right?
hardworking ones came to the U.S.
Yeah, and also those who try really hard, they are still in Greece and they try to survive within their families, and they cannot grow bigger than small, medium enterprises.
And of course, you have to add to that centuries of tax cheating under the Ottomans. And so we don't have taxpayers that are really eager to carry their load in Greece.
I think this is a myth because taxation is a price you pay for public goods. When you do not receive public goods and you have a very clear divorce between the authorities and the citizen, there is lack of trust that there is going to be a delivery of any service. But the problem in Greece is not lack of paying. The problem in Greece is lack of collecting. Again, it's a state that is not functioning properly. It has nothing to do with the culture of the individuals or the individuals' unwillingness to be engaged in this. And I'm going to tell you that since 2009 that we've been overly taxed. I mean, corporate taxation rates have gone to 43%. We have not only just regular tax that has increased, but we have extra levies and duties and like 3 different property taxes. And, I think even if you don't move your car, you have to pay a tax for not moving your car. I mean, taxation on your windows. It's really gone a little bit right berserk.
How much of this was a price that had to be paid to get the bailout money?
It is a sign of goodwill for the bailout money to come in, which is not really bailout because it's money with interest. But the point is that even though we have all these taxes now, still ability of collecting is small.
Sure.
And no one is looking at tax reform of the tax administration. And every time we do that, every time we try to do tax administration reform, there are special interests involved.
Sure.
There are special interests from abroad, believe it or not just within. There are special interests from multinationals that are actually happy to have high taxation rates because that's how they expense most of their taxation, most of their expenses to a country with a high taxation rate. They have a lower profit afterwards.
Why not follow the example of some of the former Soviet bloc countries like Estonia that went to a flat tax and saw collections soar?
Well, that would have been great if now we're not operating as an independent sovereign country anymore. So we cannot add or suggest anything. Everything in public policy or economic policy is all dictated from the Troika.
So, Elena, you were by the Prime Minister's side during the darkest days of the bailout negotiations. Give us a sense of what that was like.
Oh, it was devastating. because you think that you provide added value by being there and explaining what needs to happen. And I've only done it to 33 other countries, right? Partially successfully. And then there is this capture from special interests. And the special interests are not necessarily oligarchs. Special interests are within your own party. So you yourself, as a leader of a party, you are the leader of an existing special interest.
And that's who you're serving.
And that's who you're serving. So in the end of the day, I remember talking to mentors and colleagues and advisors of mine outside of Greece saying, I feel I want to resign every 2 days because I don't add value. And I remember this fantastic response given to me. Adding value does not always look the same as you may have remembered in your past days, Elena. In this case, adding value may actually count by reducing the level of mistakes. And I think that's my added value all these years in Greece. I've reduced the level of mistakes.
And yet the Greek voters sent PASOK packing in 2012.
Well, yeah, because of very high taxes and because of the special interests, I'm telling you, within the party, because it's a clientelistic party. You give them gifts to vote for you. So if you have no more money to give them any gifts or any clientelistic type of behaviors, then they're going to not vote for you. Similarly, the same thing occurred or is occurring to the right-wing party. And I'm afraid it's going to also occur with the radical left that is now in power.
So, Elena, give us a picture of what's happening on the ground now in Greece. What's daily life like? What's the economy look like? People dealing with the struggles under this regime?
Okay, the only beautiful thing back home is the beautiful weather in a magical country. Even if it's winter, it's still not very cold. But the sentiment is a sentiment of very high depression. We have an increase in suicide rates. People cannot do they cannot service their daily subsistence level needs.
And this is very uncharacteristic for Greeks.
Absolutely, because I want to tell you, Bill, the problem of the country was high debt of the state, not of the individuals. We're not like Ireland. Ireland had a very high private debt. Greece was like an example of high savers. Greeks had great private savings. So all these last 6 years, we've tapped on people's savings. So we've actually even taxed their savings, let alone taxing everything else. So found different ways by which you have a country that is older. We have very few young people, over 180,000. It's a miracle if you find over 180,000 between the age of 18 to 24.
They're leaving.
They're leaving. We have no birth rates that are increasing. And you have the majority of the people are over 55 and
all of them are on pensions.
And they're all on pensions. And they all have seen the high-level pensioners, those that have been educated abroad, that speak the languages, that are a skill set of employable individuals that you want in your society, are the ones that have actually received the highest level of reduction on their pensions. So we want to have an economy that is made out of old people with an average pension level of 600 to 700 euro a month, which is about, imagine, $800 a month. And with that amount, pay mortgages, your gas, your utilities, pay off medical, pharmaceuticals and so on, because obviously you're older, so you do take more than just aspirin a day, right? I mean, I live back home for the last 6 years, and I see how my father has been devastated psychologically. I mean, if I weren't around, being a Greek family and having a bit of, your family around, if I weren't around, I wouldn't really know what he would have done. And it's really sad if his pension has been reduced 73%.
So what happens to the spirit of the country? What can possibly move them forward?
So the spirit of the country was completely crashed when they voted for the two major parties, and both of them actually acted as if they were Soviet economies, and they were expropriating everything you could imagine, and they were taxing everything that was moving. So the hope kind of thought it came with this new radical left Syriza party that everybody voted, irregardless of their ideology. Why? Because ideology didn't matter anymore, since the right wing And the center left actually had expropriated most of their properties and savings. So they felt, okay, let's at least vote for this left party. Maybe it's the only other one now in the radar screen that could possibly give some hope. And that is not giving much hope. And I'm afraid we're going to end up in a political disarray, which may not be necessarily that bad, because it will give the end of the old and create a new generation of politicians.
The last referendum I remember was the Greek people vociferously saying, we don't want another bailout, we don't want another extend and pretend. And then it happened anyway.
Yeah.
What does that say?
That says that we're not really owning our own country. It was pretty much required for us to receive it. Because frankly speaking, Bill, we don't have enough income to cover pensions and salaries and basically, open up your eyes in the morning and have the country run.
So how does this play out?
If we remain as we are right now, it will look a little bit like a country that is really very beautiful. People want to go and visit. That is going to not be very expensive to visit. And it's going to have an element of chronic poverty.
It's back to the third world.
It's back to the third world pretending that it isn't.
So what are the implications on the rest of the European system?
I'm afraid because Greece has not played its cards appropriately with its politicians that it's had, the canary in the coal mine did not really
wake anybody up. I'm afraid we may actually have, but not immediately, we will have a slow death of the evolution of the European Union. Instead of allowing the Union to evolve correctly, it will probably disinvolve and then be reestablished into a different type of union. Who's next after Greece as the dominoes fall? Portugal? Spain?
Right now, things are played out as follows. The big powers are suggesting that all political parties in Greece have actually kneeled in front of this icon called the Memorandum of Bailout, right? Austerity.
Sure.
Since this has occurred, we will not have, therefore, any internal, it is assumed, there is not going to be an internal revolution again requesting not to have an austerity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way things are seen is, even if Greece is not able to survive this memorandum, reforms in Greece are assumed and perceived as increasing taxation, not simplifying your productive capacity.
They're not striking out regulations.
No,
they're not
they're
privatizing companies. They're not.
Well, privatizing companies without having property rights is a sin.
Useless.
Is a sin. We shouldn't do that. We're privatizing without having property rights. Wow. We are 100% informal. No property rights on real estate. We have a property rights system that looks a little bit like 17th century. And this is a broadcast that goes to America. So all Greek Americans that listen to me now would probably associate with what I'm saying. They have a piece of property back home and they have no clue if somebody else has trespassed it. And they don't even want to know how they're going to receive back their piece of property to give it to their grandkids or whoever else. Because it's a nightmare just to open up your eyes and try to figure out how to start. That's informality.
Sure.
That's informality. I'm going back to what I'm working on. So the situation, I think, looks like you will have a possible withdrawal of Greece from the euro with a second currency.
Interesting.
For about 2 to 5 years. This is the plan that Germany would have liked to have.
So the drachma comes back at some point?
Not necessarily. It could be called a second euro. It could be called a different kind of currency. It could be called softer euro. But it is done in a way that is fully controlled by the European Union.
So controlled devaluation, resetting of prices.
Controlled devaluation, resetting of prices with another austerity plan. The question, and the recent Prime Minister made a very correct point. He said, I had to choose between austerity with the euro or austerity with the drachma. And I chose austerity with the euro. So that's pretty much the two options given. And I think we will end up having possibly austerity with another currency other than the euro. It's going to be sold to us as a good thing. So we can actually have a proper productive change, a bit of competition,
Will that be enough?
No, it will not be enough, because a lot of the regulations and the reforms that need to be taken place in Greece are reforms that need to happen in the rest of the European Union. So when you have unions in Greece that resist taxi drivers, I give an example, resist to be reformed and allow Uber cabs to come into the country, right? And they collude with the French taxi drivers and the German taxi drivers. And I don't know who else who has taxi drivers in the European Union, obviously.
They want to stop change.
They want to stop change. Similarly with all other pocket professions that are, as I call, monopoly professions.
So this is the medieval guild system coming back.
Well, it has always been there. No one paid attention. I've been trying to say that all along. It's always been there. And it's interesting because you mentioned Eastern Europe. When Eastern Europe fell apart in terms of communism disappearing, you were noticing two forces. The guild system of the European Union pushing towards the former Soviet republics and make them an extension of the existing European Union. And then the American policymakers that were flying in to give advice, and they were not really seeing that there was this actually underlying fight taking place.
Yeah. Elena, as a Greek American, give me some hope for the future of the land of my forebears. After all this agony, what do you see out there?
Well, I'm going to tell you the following. The Greeks have been around 3,000 years before Christ, and they will still be around. They're very resilient and strong people. They have gone through hell the last 6 years, and I cannot even imagine of another nation I have worked with. I've worked with 33 countries that could have even dream of having 1 month of the austerity that we've gone through. And I think it's going to get actually a little worse, but I don't think Greeks will lose hope. They are very entrepreneurial. They have managed to survive. They managed to innovate. Believe it or not, a lot of innovations that are taking place in technology today have been produced in the last 5 years in Greece. And they are sold at Silicon Valley distinct companies. Yeah, it's amazing. So there is no lack of drive. There is no lack of energy. What there is lack of is a lack of, if I can say, national consistency from the policymakers. So you have the people that are market-oriented and entrepreneurial, and they're trying really hard. And then you have a state that is kind of like squared and moves around as if it belongs to a zombie state. Yeah.
Elena, good luck. Please keep in touch, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
That was Elena Panaritis, founder of the Thought for Action Foundation, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Real Clear Radio Hour is a not-for-profit, donor-supported program. To make sure you don't miss any of our shows, stop by realclearradio.org and sign up for updates. And if you'd like to hear more programs like this, please hit the donate button or contact us to become a corporate supporter. And stop by realclearmarkets.com, my go-to place for diverse views on political economics. Ahead, we'll speak with Cuban author and journalist Carlos Alberto Montaner about the past and future prospects for his troubled homeland. Stay tuned.